All right, because we're on the hour and it's the formal time to start, I shall open the work group. So this is the OpenChain Education Work Group. This is one of our regular monthly meetings. And today we're going to be covering a bunch of important topics. Some relate to the evolution of the work group, where we're seeing a handover in the chairpersonship, and some relate to future activities of the work group. But before we start, as always, I'm just going to show the antitrust policy notice slide. So we show this at the beginning of every meeting, and the antitrust policy in full can be found on the Linux Foundation website. If you have any questions, you're from an LF member company, you can ask those questions of our counsel, Andy Updegrove. With the formalities out of the way, let's begin to get this meeting kicked off. And the first thing to do is to give a big thank you to Nathan and the contributors who've helped the education work group do so much over the last year and in the years previously. So Nathan has chaired the group for 1 year, and before him it was Balakrishna. Good work all. Now the handover of the chairpersonship means we have a new person taking the helm, and according to the community votes, and with the formal steering committee approval just coming in, that's Andrew Katz, who's on this call and will run the rest of the meeting. Andrew, I wanted to say well done and thank you so much for all of your work. I do hope perhaps I sent an email with a slight update to the slides a few minutes ago because we just had a certain approval for telco. I don't know if you've got the slides on your end, if you'd like to share them or you'd like me to run through the slides and click forward as you go. Up to you.
Yes, I don't have the updated version, but I did notice that that Martin's email came in as well, and yeah, he makes a very good point about the work that he's been doing as well. So we can also have a chat about that. So yeah, if you would be kind enough to continue sharing and run through the slides.
Absolutely, and
that would be great.
Let's do more than that. Let's live edit. So we've got Andrew Katz. New slide there to confirm Andrew's here. And Martin, I'm going to throw in your stuff here. So I'm going to put this just down on this point, slide 3. Everyone look away. You're not meant to see the slide for 3 clicks. Okay. Not passed over on the agenda now. It's being added to the agenda. We'll amend it. Patient videos. Proposal bag. Their creation. Boom. Right. Okay. Now, technically, you didn't see that. And we're going to hand over to Andrew, and you tell me to go to the next slide as we go, and I will click forward.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed, Shane. Thank you so much for that very kind introduction. I think this is going to be a challenging job simply because the work that has been done already has been so good, and to keep up anything approaching that level of commitment and progress is going to be a little bit tricky. But I will do whatever I can. So welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining the meeting. A lot of really exciting stuff has been going on in the world of OpenChain, and I think that gives us a great opportunity to really look at what we've been doing in the education work group, and if it's appropriate, then to expand that. So I've had a few thoughts about the way that we can move forward. So Shane, if you can move on to the next slide, please. Delighted to find that the current set of trainings slides, which was originally a Google document, has now been moved over to GitHub. So this is consistent with basically all of the documentation that OpenChain is producing, and it just makes it a lot easier for people who are working on them, but also for anyone externally to locate them. They're all in the same place. They're all in a very consistent format. So that makes life more straightforward. And for those of you that are not familiar with working in Markdown, it's it's very straightforward. It's as simple as possible. I just suggest that you do a little bit of Googling on a guide to Markdown. It's basically a text-based format with a few additional characters that allow you to add some fairly simple formatting. But that doesn't mean that the outputs, they can still look very good, very professional. But it just makes everything look more consistent, more straightforward, and it's easier to you can get tool chains that can move them into other formats easily as well. So I think doing that is great. Shane has done some great work in doing that transfer, um, and there are they're left in good shape, but I think there are still some outstanding comments that we need to address. So my proposal is, and I don't, as far as I'm concerned, this meeting is basically an introductory meeting where we can discuss what we think is worthwhile doing and what the program for the year is going to be. So my proposal is that for the next meeting, we can just run through those comments. I've had a look through them already, and I think they're all sort of pretty easily addressable and sensible. But I'll just refresh my knowledge of those prior to the next meeting, and then we can run through those sort of very rapidly. I think that we're going to feel that they're complete pretty soon. That's my gut feel. I don't know, Shane, if you've got any thoughts on that. But I was sort of pretty pleased to see the position that they were in.
Yeah, I mean, I think the current ones are, I think, ready for a point release, more or less.
Exactly. Yeah.
The history of this is these are the original OpenChain training slides way back 2015, 2016. First edition was released as a PowerPoint. And then more recently, Mary, who's on the call, Mary, and Nathan have been working on this update with the Google Doc for quite a while. And there have been other comments coming in from contributors like Yari and so on. And I think that that document and what's been snapshotted to Markdown is probably ready to go out as a point release. And then the outstanding comments and potentially further comments to build another point release down the line. And if there's consensus, if this plan that you've outlined is okay with people, I can take the current snapshot and put it into a new PowerPoint as a direct update to the original training slides while we work on another point release for later in the year.
Yeah, that sounds perfect to me. Excellent. So if anyone else has got any other comments, by the way, just feel free to leap straight in. I'm very happy for this to turn into a general discussion if it's appropriate to do so. Super. Okay, well, I think that covers that slide. So Shane, if we can move on to the next one. So supplier education leaflet, and I think these sort of documents are really, really important. One of the one of the criteria for OpenChain is to make sure that there is outreach, that people are aware of what OpenChain is for, what it can do. So anything that is aimed at outreach and helping other organizations that maybe are not familiar with what OpenChain is all about to come into the OpenChain fold are extremely welcome. So what we have at the moment is looking really good, and that's great. So I think Shane is correct. So there's a lot of input from the Japanese working group on this one. So many thanks to them for this. So again, starting from the next session, what I propose to do is for us all to run through this and make sure that we feeling comfortable with it. And once we are, and I think this is going to be pretty straightforward, then we can hand that over to the Japan work group for review and confirmation, and clearly we can request them for translation. And again, it's part of the outreach process. We've had some great input from other work groups and places like Korea, Germany, for example, for translation of all sorts of OpenChain materials into different geographies, different languages, different regions. So it's extremely helpful for them to do that, and that should certainly be encouraged. One question I put on there as well is, and actually this is partially a question for you, Shane, because it sort of there may be budgetary requirements involved as well, is whether because this is outreach material, whether we want to be thinking about whether we need a bit of additional effort in terms of graphic design applied to it. We've had some really fantastic internal assistance from people within the OpenChain community, sort of in terms of graphic design, and the logos that we've got and things are great, and I really love them. But in terms of producing documentation that looks attractive and is something that conveys the message, I'm just wondering whether we should explore getting some external graphic design input on that, and whether there's a possibility there might be some budget available to do that.
And the answer is yes, absolutely. Once we're satisfied with the update, I can work on a draft and bring in LF Creative to help polish and get that ready for us.
Yeah, okay, fantastic. Great. Right, next slide, please. Right, okay, so I had a very small role to play in these, but Martin has sort of very much taken the lion's share of the effort and really did some fantastic work in creating a bunch of educational videos. We had a session during OpenChain October last year, where many of these videos were released to the public, and that was sort of really successful. But I know Martin's been doing a lot of other work as well on top of that. Martin, I don't know if I can invite you to sort of come in and sort of talk a little bit about the videos and what your thoughts are behind these, and then we can have a discussion about surrounding those in terms of the way that we may want to socialize them, extend them, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, sure, thanks. I guess the simple potted history is that internally in First Light, we were using a set of training videos around open source and compliance, which were actually on LinkedIn Learning, and we stopped using LinkedIn Learning. So I had an internal need to create some training material, and I thought it was appropriate that that would be bite-sized videos in general to go out to all of the internal people. And basically, I thought, hey, well, if I'm going to the effort of making it, I might as well make it available to other people. And so within the UK working group, I guess I was largely doing that. So quite a few of these have been reviewed by the UK working group as well. And they've certainly appreciated that they've pointed out a couple of mistakes and I've fixed them. What I've specifically mentioned here is the set of videos that I've made, which are based on the training that this education work group did that became the LFC Linux Foundation course 193, if I remember correctly. So I would suggest, if everyone is okay with them, that actually we put these onto the OpenChain YouTube library as a educational channel or something like that. There's something like six chapters, something like that. So it's all in like 5 minutes to 10 minutes chunks. So basically, thinking that it's worth to try and push these more widely. Within this particular GitHub, if you go up a couple of levels, there is some other related training material stuff as well in there at the moment, which we could also promote via the education work group and the YouTube library. But specifically, I'm mentioning this at the moment because it's based on the material that came from this work group in the first place. So it seems kind of sensible to kind of donate it back to this working group, I guess.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So I'm certainly going to review those. We've got the link there, so we'll make sure that that link's available to everyone. and I would encourage people to look at the videos as they are. And again, in the next session, then we can hear people's views as to whether it's appropriate to proceed in the way that Martin suggests. I personally think that it certainly is. I think the more material like this that is available to people, the better. So then, the next question after that is, do we feel, and this is not a question aimed specifically at Martin, because I don't want to sort of put any more work on his shoulders, but do we feel that it is a worthwhile exercise for us to generate more topics and create more videos and add to this specific library? That's an open question. I'm not going to ask for responses to that at the moment, but what I do suggest is that, and I'll also circulate this link as well. I think Marcus was asking for it to be put in the chat, which it has now mysteriously appeared. Thank you very much indeed, Martin. But I'll make sure this goes on the mailing list as well, and encourage people to just spend a little bit of time taking a look at those, so we can hear their views on where to go next with this. But once more, Martin, thank you so much for the excellent work that you've done on these, and I think that's set us very much on the right path here. Super. Right. Okay. We are romping through this fairly rapidly. So slide number 9, please, Shane. Right.
Maybe I can help with this. It's a block of text.
If you can, yes, if you could, thank you. Yes.
Right. So Telco has been noodling in a corner for quite a while on defining SBOM quality, and essentially they've got material which makes up a guide to describe an approach that can be used for determining the quality of SBOM. And this was put forward to the steering committee for approval to be released as an OpenChain guide, as an official OpenChain document. And the steering committee provided no objections. So therefore, here we are. We have this guide completed by Telco and ready to be converted into an official OpenChain reference guide. That would be our guide to SBOM quality determination. So approval is there from the steering committee, and that means the last step is basically this work group to have eyes on, for it to be flagged here, and people can see it. If there's nothing visibly wrong with the current version, then it goes out as a document, and ideas and so on fostered from this group are put into the next version of it. So in other words, this document is ready to be an OpenChain document. This group is the gateway to that. So eyes on. Check if you think it's good, looking all right. If you have ideas for improvement, make memos, and then we proceed, pending no, oh my God, this is terrible, objections. We proceed to release, and the ideas for improvement are taken into a future version. But the chair of Telco is here, Marketon is here, and maybe you'd like to say something about this and how you'd like to see it distributed as well. If not, then it's a simple enough process. So I imagine, Andrew, our turnaround on this can be really simple in that now it's in front of the group. We can have a look at it, and if it's okay with you, then we just proceed to release as an OpenChain document, and future iterations. Yeah,
sounds good. Sounds good. Yeah, absolutely. So again, so what we'll do after this meeting is, I'll just circulate these various topics that we've been talking about, encourage people to have a look at these various links, and then we can make some decisions for the next meeting. So I suspect the next meeting may well involve some pretty rapid decision making, and hopefully, and I'm fairly confident that the answer to a lot of those decisions is going to be yes. and that's always a good thing to hear. Okay, thank you very much for introducing that, Shane. That's much appreciated. So next slide, please. Yeah, so this is something that I would be interested in sort of hearing people's thoughts about. This is a topic that I have considered because it is arising out of a live client engagement that we have at the moment. So the next couple of slides basically cover issues that have arisen in live client engagements, and a lot of them are really, again, there. I mentioned this topic of outreach before. I think a lot of the work that we've been doing within OpenChain is by people who are familiar with the world of compliance, people who are familiar with the legal background, people who are familiar with the technological background. That's absolutely fantastic to have access to all of that expertise, and that's absolutely superb. But I think what we need to do is try to bring more people into the OpenChain fold and essentially demystify something that actually is not that mysterious anyway. But we need to make people in the wider world more comfortable with understanding, the various topics that we're talking about, and almost, in a sense, to try to sort of commoditize the concept of open chain, so that it just becomes something that is, an integral part of business. And this outreach can happen both obviously from one organization to another, but it can equally happen within organizations as well, particularly large organizations. And this is where I'm talking about this particular client engagement that we've got at the moment is with a large organization. And they are saying to me, Andrew, we need help with explaining what we're doing within the organization to other business units. Now, there's already some work that's been done on this, and you can have a look on the OpenChain GitHub and see some work that has been done. But there's a little bit of inconsistency between the formats. And what I'm proposing is that we put together a suite of sets of just 3 or 4 slides for different departments within an organization to explain what OpenChain is to them, how it impacts them, what they need to understand about OpenChain, and why it's beneficial not only for them but for the organization as a whole. And I think this can be done fairly straightforwardly. I think we need, for each of those, we could do with a set of 3 or 4 slides per explainer. They need to be nicely designed, they need to be attractive, they need to be professional, but they need to get the concept across sort of straightforwardly and simply, but also provide a hook to enable further conversation, so that then people can ask the questions about these various aspects. So it seems to me, and as I say, this is a project that I'm embarking on anyway for a client, and I'm very happy to share what we're doing in greater detail if we think that as a work group it's worthwhile taking a look at this. So I think the sales and marketing department of an organization needs to understand what OpenChain is, so that it become an integral part of what they do when they are selling their organization's products containing open source software to third parties. I think it's also helpful for the C-suite to have some sort of visibility on what's going on here, and obviously the emphasis there would be different. They would have to understand why it's good for the organisation as a whole, why it essentially positively impacts shareholder value, but also we can talk about the benefits of community both externally and within the organisation, and so on. The HR department could also usefully do with some sort of explainer on OpenChain. Sort of various of the OpenChain requirements, obviously impact on individuals within the organization and their obligations. The HR department frequently has responsibility for training and development within an organization, for example. So that's something that's relevant. But they will also be responsible for a number of policies and procedures for employees within an organization. So that may impinge on things like how the company deals with signing DCOs, for example. So there's a fair amount of interaction I think between open source and potentially and the HR department, and a lot of assumptions that the HR department might already have in terms of, and quite understandably, in terms of maintaining an organization's IP and trade secrets and locking them down as much as possible, may conflict with the wider aims of the organization in terms of becoming involved or even initiating open source projects. So there's some quite interesting questions to be had round there. And so what will be useful is just, as I say, a set of 3 or 4 slides that explain some of these principles in basic at a basic level, and then that can encourage conversations in greater depth as well. Clearly, compliance and risk management legal departments, they're going to be heavily involved in open source risk management anyway. But my thought here is that it should be something that is presented on a sort of essentially a non-scary basis, to say that the sort of risks that we're looking at in the context of open source can be managed in the same way as risks in other aspects of the organization as well. So again, try to treat OpenChain as being a standard that is dealt with in much the same way as other standards for compliance would be dealt with in an organization, and try to remove some of the mystique about it. And I've got a little bit to say about that on the next slide as well. And then finally, an explainer for developers. And the way that we want to sell OpenChain to developers is basically, this is not yet another box ticking exercise that we're requiring you to do. We're not trying to make your life more difficult. Actually, we're going to make it more straightforward, because we're going to give you very simple pathways to enable you to be able to select the components that you want to be able to use, to make it straightforward to get approvals for components that are not automatically permitted because of the various policies that we have, and also to bolster the idea within an organization that open source software is very important to them. And obviously, as we know, this is something that is very attractive to developers. It makes it easier to attract developers to an organization when the organization is perceived as not only being open source friendly, but also having good governance around open source as well. Because we all know that some of the best developers are those developers that are also involved in external open source projects. So they want to make sure that the licenses of those projects are properly followed and they're honored. So within the organization, if we can demonstrate to developers that it's essentially it's a two-way street, that we expect people to honor the license agreements that apply to our software, because we honor the license agreements or the licenses that apply to other people's software. And I think that's quite a powerful message, and it makes developers feel comfortable and empowers them, but ultimately it makes life more straightforward for them, because it simplifies the pathway towards them being able to get hold of the functionality from third-party components that they need in order to do their job properly. So I'd be very interested to hear if, first of all, whether people feel that that's fundamentally a good idea, that we can produce some of these explainers, and secondly, whether they feel that there's any other topics that we could usefully add to this as well. So I'm sort of happy to open the floor now for a couple of minutes if people got anything to say. If not, that's fine. We can sort of move. This is a new concept that I've only just explained to people, so we can deal with this in the next session, and people can have a think about it between now and then. So if anyone has any comments, please feel free to leap in.
I think it's a terrible idea, Andrew.
I thought you'd say that, Martin.
No, actually, I think probably at least a couple of these, I think I'd be interested in at least looking at turning into bite-sized videos. Particularly, I think like the C-suite management one. I think they'd probably not even want to look at a couple of slides. If we could make a 2-minute video that gets across the key bits, probably the same for the sales and marketing as well. But obviously, it depends on what the content we come up with actually is. But yeah, I think that would be. Yeah, I think this is a really good idea. So I think we should extend it to videos as well somehow.
Yep.
But we'll look at that when that time comes.
Yeah.
I think it would also be good from what we were talking about earlier, like in terms of like having graphic design on the supplier leaflet. So if we can make this into, I think the original supplier leaflet was actually designed to be a paper leaflet that people could give out. But
Yes.
actually, if
Yeah.
we could have paper things that we could potentially give out at different conferences and stuff, perhaps that will help to get some more engagement around the place as well. Um, uh, just so you can give people not a specific compliance related conference, but if you can give out stuff to people and that is easy to make or is provided by the Linux Foundation to us to give out, then that makes it a bit
Mhm.
easier.
Yeah, no, that sounds good to me. And Marcus has come up with the suggestion for additional explain for the documentation training department, and yeah, I think that will be sort of very helpful as well. So I don't know if Shane wants to go and do some live editing and add that into the list that we've got down there. But yeah, that's certainly something that is well worth consideration. So as I say, this is
Andrew, sorry I interrupted. I actually wanted to
yeah,
add a
sure, no,
point
that's fine,
here.
Balakrishna.
See,
Yes.
the document which is proposed here, this is actually helpful in some cases. See, there are some organizations where people like us are advocating for open chain and pushing our respective organizations to join open chain. But
Yes.
and of course, when we are advocating them, we are giving them documentation or explanation on what is available to us at our disposal, right? Like, what's the achievement of open chain? What are the standards or general practice which we have set across? We explain all these things, but sometimes what happens is when there are multiple partners who are involved in researching these things and convey the information, there is disproportionate information that is being shared. So having such document would help us advocate better. For example, in
Yeah.
my own organization, I've been pushing my organization to join OpenChain for past 2 years since I've been there.
Hmm.
And they're still considering because they're yet to be convinced. Fortunately, just this month, we adopted LFC 193 as an official OSS course for our developers, which even helps us with all those certifications and other things. But
Yeah.
while when it comes to joining OpenChain, the all the every single category mentioned here, except for the developers, are little skeptical on why should we join, what are we gaining from it. When I do share all the achievements, they say, okay, we will consume those things, but why should we join? That's a big question for them. So having such document and which, if it would describe what would be the gain for those organizations in a small statement or in a brief phrase, I think it would
Hmm.
help a lot in bringing in more people, bringing in more
Fantastic.
companies to join here. Because
Yeah. No,
I
that.
have to say,
Mhm.
even though my own organization, even though if it has not joined OpenChain or any of the foundation, we are doing remarkable job in open source compliance
Yes.
within our organization. Just that no one else knows.
Yeah. No, that's a really
That's
good point. So thanks for sharing that, Balakrishna. Much appreciated.
right. Thank you.
So I think, and I think from what sort of Martin was saying, I mean, as I say, I'm going to go ahead and do some of these anyway. So what I'm thinking now is, if I sort of focus, and I'm happy to do the legwork on this one, sort of create the first one for the C-suite, and then present that to the work group and see what you think about it in terms of approach. That might be quite a good way to kick this off, unless people think that it's worthwhile focusing on a different one. Obviously, if anyone else wants to take a similar approach, Marcus, not that again if I want to put anything on your shoulders, but if you wanted to do an explainer for the documentation and training department's first draft of that, then that would also be great. But clearly, I'm not going to assume that if anyone suggests that something is a good idea, that means they're volunteering to do it. Absolutely the opposite is the case. Okay. So fantastic. Thank you very much for that. So it sounds as though that's a sort of vote in favour of this in principle. So next slide, please, Shane. So as I mentioned earlier, I think this is really something that forms part of a sort of suite of slides, and it also helps to implement OpenChain within a medium to large organization because of this outreach towards the different parts of the organization as well. And so one of the things that is really helpful to consider, and it may even be a question that we have sort of two parallel sets of slides. The first set of slides is really advocacy, which basically says why it's a good idea for you and your organization. But the second set of slides, and they will be broadly in common between the different parts of the organization as well, they can talk about implementation. So if it has been decided within an organization that an OpenChain compliance program is going to be implemented, then how do you do that? And organizations, generally are working on the basis of these sort of processes are subject to being introduced, but then continually monitored. And the idea is to have a mechanism of continuous improvement. And this is certainly the conversations that I've been having with larger organizations, is that they're really keen on this idea of continuous improvement, and they're applying that within all sorts of different sectors within their organizations, and there's no reason why OpenChain implementation should be any different. So this then ties into one of the other areas which is helpful, particularly for those organizations that operate on this sort of basis of continuous improvement, is to introduce something that I've spoken to various of you about before in a different context. But the idea of implementing and presenting a capability maturity model. And I don't propose to go into what that is in any depth at the moment. But basically, just to give you a little bit of background information, at Orcro, what we've been doing with a number of clients is we have taken the OpenChain specification for open source license compliance, and we've looked at all of the various obligations that are required for an organization to undertake in order to comply with that. And so the idea is that for each one of those obligations, each one of those activities, you can see how mature the organization is in running that particular activity. And there are 5 levels, starting from we sort of know that this is something that we have to do, but we haven't done very much about it yet, to there are people that are aware of what needs to be done, and there's bits and pieces of documentation that talk about this, but it's not particularly coordinated, through to we have properly and fully coordinated practices and procedures that cover this particular activity, through to we have these coordinated procedures that cover this activity, but also we're gaining information in terms of KPIs, and we're operating in accordance with those KPIs, and from time to time, we make changes in order to improve them, to the most mature level, which is basically there is a continuous process of monitoring the KPIs with a view to changing the process where necessary to improve them permanently. And we've done a lot of work in the background with clients to develop a maturity model which is based on the OpenChain specification, and we're running through that through with a number of clients at the moment. And what we've said from the outset is that we are prepared to share that the sort of the basic findings that we have in the framework for this with the OpenChain project, and indeed we've done some of that already. And this is something that a lot of larger organizations are already familiar with, this sort of methodology in terms of all sorts of supply chain management in areas like pharmaceuticals, in areas like the agribusiness, and also mechanical manufacturing, all of these things. So there's nothing, again, there's nothing particularly magic about this. All we've done is we have taken existing methodologies for developing improvement processes within organizations and just mapped them onto ISO 5230 2020. One of the things that I would like to do, and I realise that we do have a sort of potentially a pretty packed work plan here, is to be able to introduce this to the education work group and develop materials around this, again, particularly for those medium to large organisations that are interested in this idea of continuous improvement. Now, I said earlier, we have got a lot on our plate. I don't think we have necessarily, because an awful lot of the work has already been done, as we sort of talked about earlier, by other work groups and by the work that Balakrishna and Nathan have done already, and the other contributors. So the next session that we run, I think we can probably say, right, we've got to sort of release candidates for those, and then they can develop a life of their own. They're ready for publication. And the monitoring cycle is going to become somewhat slower for those. So I think what we are able to do with our time, and I'm happy to hear any input that anyone has on this now. But again, we can talk about it in the next session. Is in terms of which of these topics we feel is most beneficial for the work group to be concentrating on. So. A lot of this, I appreciate, will have been presented to you for the first time. So, I'm not expecting any direct feedback at the moment. But equally, if anyone has anything that they want to say about any of these topics, then I would be obviously delighted to hear from you.
Based on the work you've done so far on this, Andrew, do you think it also makes sense to do a mapping against OpenChain materials? So, for example, like level 1 would be some training about open source. Well, hey, here's some training that you might be able to use, for example, that's from OpenChain. And level 2 might include some tooling, for example, and you could point to the tooling working group for extra information. Would that make sense or not?
Yeah, very, very, very much so. And this is something that we have been working on internally. And we have to be a little bit careful here, as you will appreciate. And I think in terms of the way you phrase what you said, I think you appreciate this already. Sorry, excuse me. Is that as we know, the OpenChain specification is not intended to be prescriptive at all. But necessarily, we know things like if you've got any sort of reasonable software project that you're developing, you're going to have to get tooling. Now, in theory, the OpenChain specification would permit you to just have a large notebook and write everything down by hand, or slightly more plausibly, but equally impractically, as we sort of go into the next generation of software development, have all of the components in a spreadsheet. For example. So that's the only slight caveat that I have about that, is that a level of maturity will demand tooling, and I think that's absolutely clear, and I think that's what you were saying, and not only.
Yes, I wasn't necessarily saying that. I mean, obviously, yeah,
Okay.
the tooling would be on the maturity somewhere. I guess I was just saying, you're right, we're not prescriptive, but we need to give people hints how to go from one level of maturity to the next. If we just say there's these 5 levels of maturity, but don't actually give them any more information of how to get from level 1 to level 2, it's a little, or even from level 0 to level 1, it's kind of a bit pointless almost. So no, I think it's hints as to where and how they could go to fill in the blocks on a particular maturity level. Move up from one level to the next. And you're right, it won't be prescriptive. It'll say, have a look at these things, and maybe you take this, maybe you get a third party consultant to do it for you, maybe you tailor it to your own situation, maybe you use it as is for level 1, but level 2 you need to be a bit more sophisticated. I guess I'm just wondering whether there'd be those kinds of hints, if you like, to direct people how to go from one to the other. Fill in across the board on one particular level of maturity, so they understand how to move forward, not just how to measure themselves at the end.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And in fact, what I'm hoping to be able to share with you fairly shortly, we're still working on it at the moment, is I've basically created a fairly simple spreadsheet. So the idea is I want to try and make this as simple as possible. So what we have is all of the activities that you're required to undertake as a result of an OpenChain program. And then on the other axis, we've got levels of maturity. And it's just an example of what this might look like within your, like, what practically, what are you doing? In terms of training, for example, that would be sort of level one is sort of self-directed training, and then there's some issues. Maybe we'll give you a few URLs and you've got to go and find them. Level two is a more sort of structured approach. We say, right, these are materials you've got to have a look at. Level three is the point at which there is a structured set of materials. They're tailored to the organization. We're asking for feedback in terms of the quality of those materials and doing some assessments around them. Level four at that stage is there's a consistent set of materials. We're doing a regular set of assessments and feedback on them, but maybe we're not necessarily have a regular program for improving them. Level five is when you get the metrics are feeding back into this continuous process. But I think exactly what I'm trying to do in there is to give examples of what people are doing at that level, and in that case, there may be some examples of the sort of the tooling or systems that people are using to achieve that. But we just have to be very careful that we're not saying, this is the way you must do it. This is just an example of how an organization is approaching this. They've reached level four because they've, developed some sort of Drupal-based system. You don't have to use Drupal, but if you do, so hopefully that's the sort of thing that you're thinking about. Super, thanks, Martin. Right. So what I'll do is I'll write a sort of little bit of text around this, sort of explaining a bit more, how I see this happening, and hopefully by the time of the next meeting, I'll actually be able to share this spreadsheet that we've been working on with you, so you can have a look and see how the thing is starting to come together. Fantastic. Okay, now that's been sort of really excellent, positive feedback from anyone. There's quite a lot for me to do now in terms of sort of summarising all that and preparing for the next meeting. And I'll put a bit more structure around the agenda next time. But I think I just wanted to use this meeting basically to sort of introduce myself, what we've been doing, to say thank you to everyone that has, I'm building on the shoulders of giants here, and there really is some great work that we're building on. So thank you to everyone for that. So any final thoughts from anyone? I think I'm going to be able to give you a little bit of time back, but obviously very happy to sort of take any further comments or any observations that people may have right now.
I guess I'm going to say apologies to Shane, but I think this is the best attended meeting we've had for quite some time, and I'm as bad as everybody else because the previous time didn't work for us. But I guess, do we think this will work, this time slot, etc.? I mean, I'm all for it, and it seems to, but I guess now's the time to discuss or we review in a couple of months' time as to how it's going.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it works for me because so this is fine for UK time. But if anyone has any comments about the timing or whether we get to the point where we feel that we want to have some sort of variable timing that makes it easier for people in different hemispheres to be able to log into every other meeting or join every other meeting or whatever it happens to be. There is no obvious solution to this. I know that Shane has juggled wildly all the other work groups to try to make things work as well as they can, and he's sort of done a fantastic job for doing that. But certainly, my proposal is that certainly we stick with this time for now. If we feel that it would be better served to move it, then I'm very open to that as well.
This timing sounds good. Even maybe in another 2 months I can start collaborating and contributing regularly.
Yeah.
By the way, welcome, Andrew. All the best. Looking
Thank you,
forward to working
Balakrishna.
with you.
Yeah, fantastic. No, likewise, and I really appreciate that. Thank you. Right. Okay, well, that's fantastic. Thank you, everyone. We've had some sort of great responses, and I'm sort of really enthused. I think we're going to do some great stuff for this year. I will put a sort of summary together of what we've been talking about. Feel free to continue to communicate on the mailing list. The more communication that we've got, the better, obviously. Thank you, as always, to Shane for organising everything and keeping the show on the road. And anyone is always able to contact me at any time if they've got any particular issues they want to raise, either as a part of the group or offline. That's not a problem. Super.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
Excellent. Right. Well, I think that means we can wind up now. So yes. So for those of you who have a reasonable amount of the rest of the day to enjoy, please enjoy it. If you don't, enjoy tomorrow. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Bye-bye now.
Thanks very much.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.